Sometimes I wonder how different things might have been if I had just said no that day. No to helping, no to giving, no to staying silent. But back then I still held on to the belief that if I gave enough, loved deeply and remained patient, they would finally see me. That they would choose me too. I grew up in a cozy little red brick house on Maple Lane. It wasn't extravagant, but it was home. Dad took pride in fixing everything himself. Whether it was a leaking faucet, a broken fence, or the porch step that always seemed to sag. Mom's garden was always full of life, overflowing with daisies and lavender. And then there was my younger brother, Jason, the golden child. Jason was 4 years younger than me, yet from the very beginning, it was obvious he had a different place in the family. When I aced a test, my parents smiled. When Jason barely scraped by with a B-, they applauded. He puts in so much effort, Mom would say proudly. School's harder for boys, you know. If he broke something, it was just an accident. If I spoke up about anything, I was being dramatic. So I loved him. I loved them all. So when I turned 18 and got accepted into a college an hour away, I didn't complain. I packed my bags, hugged my parents goodbye, and left the house on Maple Lane, believing it would always be there, a constant in my life. But everything started shifting the moment I left. My parents never once offered to help with my rent, even as I juggled classes and part-time jobs. You're doing great, sweetie, Mom would say over the phone. It's good for you to learn independence. Meanwhile, Jason flunked out of community college and moved back home. He's just figuring things out, Dad reassured me when I called, frustrated. Not everyone finds their path right away. Must be nice, I muttered, staring at the overdue rent notice on my kitchen table. By the time I turned 26, I had built a stable, albeit modest, life for myself. I lived in a small but tidy apartment and worked full-time as a medical assistant. Every month I sent a little money home, just enough to help with groceries, repairs, or whatever else they needed. It wasn't much, but it was something. Jason, meanwhile, was 22 and had yet to hold down a steady job for more than a few months. But no one ever talked about that. Not on birthdays, not at Christmas, not even when I noticed a brand new car sitting in the driveway with Jason's name on the plate. Is that Jason's? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Dad chuckled. Yeah, we co-signed. He needs a way to get around if he's ever going to land a decent job. But he doesn't have a job, I pointed out. How's he paying for insurance? There was a brief silence before Mom spoke, her tone sharp. That's none of your concern, Sophia. We're family. We help each other. For years I had told myself to let things go. To put family first. To be the bigger person. But something inside me cracked the day I came home for Thanksgiving and saw that the for sale sign was missing from the front yard. Did you take the house off the market? I asked, sipping my coffee at the kitchen table. Oh, honey, Mom said with a bright smile. We never told you. We decided not to sell. We're giving the house to Jason. I blinked. Wait, giving? As in, signing it over to him? Of course, Dad chimed in. It's the least we can do to help him get on his feet. My hands trembled as I set my mug down. You're giving him the house? While I've spent nearly a decade paying my own rent and even sending you money? You've always been responsible, Mom said as if it were a compliment. You don't need help. Jason does. I felt my stomach twist. Jason hasn't done anything. You've handed him everything while I've worked for every little thing I have. Mom's expression hardened. Her voice lost its warmth. You're sounding ungrateful, Sophia. You should be happy for your brother. Honestly, I think you resent him just because he's loved. Loved? I echoed, stunned. Yes, she snapped. And you? You're nothing but a freeloader, Sophia. You take care of yourself. It was like being punched in the gut. I had been taking care of myself since I was 18, sending them money every month, helping whenever they needed me. And somehow I was the freeloader. That night I packed my bags early and left. No goodbye hugs. No leftovers wrapped up for me to take home. Just those words ringing in my ears. You take care of yourself. And so I did. But I also did something else. I stopped the money train. The morning after I canceled the bank transfers, I woke up expecting to feel guilty. I thought the silence in my apartment would feel lonely, like I had abandoned something sacred. But instead I felt free. Like I could finally breathe without dragging a weight behind me. That feeling didn't last long. The first voicemail came from Mom, her voice deceptively cheerful. Hi, sweetie. I think there's an issue with the bank. The money didn't come through this month. Could you check on that? Hope you're well. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the delete button. No concern. No asking how I was. Just a demand wrapped in fake sweetness. Then came a text from Jason. Just 2 words. Where's rent? No greeting. No punctuation. Just entitlement. By the end of the week I had 3 more messages from Mom. Each one less patient than the last. The final one was sharp and accusatory. Sophia, you can't just cut us off. Jason depends on that money, and I won't be punished for a decision that was made for the good of our family. I didn't respond. For the first time in years I chose silence. The following Sunday my Aunt Linda called. She was my mother's older sister, someone who always kept her distance from family drama but never missed a holiday. I just wanted to check in, she said cautiously. Your mom is upset. Because I stopped sending money? I asked flatly. Pause. Yes. But also because she says you're being selfish. That you're abandoning the family. I let out a bitter laugh. I was the family, Linda. Who do you think has been paying for groceries, repairs, Jason's car? They gave him the house and called me a freeloader. Linda sighed. I told her this would come back to bite her, but she's always had a blind spot for Jason. I'm fine, I said. Better, actually. And I meant it. But my peace didn't last long. Weeks later I came home to an envelope slipped under my door. No return address, just my name scrawled in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a letter. Sophia, I can't believe how heartless you've become. You think we're mooching off you? Jason has had setbacks. Meanwhile, you've always had it easy, scholarships, a job, your own place. Not everyone's path is so simple. If you can't support your family in hard times, maybe you're not the good daughter you think you are. I sat on my kitchen floor, the letter dangling from my fingers. But this time her words didn't hurt. Because for the first time I saw the truth. This wasn't love. This was fear. And she was right about one thing, I was done. I had seen him, pale, unshaven, jittery, like someone who had spent too many nights restless and too many mornings nursing hangovers. I walked past him without acknowledgement. Wait, he snapped, grabbing my arm. You're really going to do this? Just cut us off and act like we don't exist. I yanked my arm free and turned to face him. You've been existing just fine, Jason, on my dime, for years. You're so dramatic, he scoffed. Mom's sick over this, you know. You've destroyed her. No, Jason, I said, my voice steady. She destroyed herself the moment she chose to shield you instead of raising you. And now she expects me to clean up the mess. He let out a short, bitter laugh. Wow, you really think you're better than us? I think I worked for everything I have, I shot back. You wouldn't know what that feels like. He recoiled as if I had struck him. Fine, he muttered. You'll regret this. Family is all you have. But that was the thing, he wasn't my family anymore. Not in the way that meant security, love, or loyalty. Just shared blood and years of disappointment. A week later my phone rang. It was Rachel, an old high school friend. Hey, she said hesitantly. I saw your mom at the church potluck. She was saying things. What kind of things? I asked. She hesitated. That you cut her off. That you've turned cold and ungrateful. That you're too busy chasing success to care about your own mother. I exhaled slowly. Of course she did. She also said you threatened Jason, Rachel added. That stopped me cold. What? Yeah. She told people he came to talk to you and you threatened to call the police. Said you're tearing the family apart. I laughed. Not because it was funny but because it was so predictable. Twisting reality to paint herself as the tragic victim had always been my mother's greatest skill. That never happened, I said flatly. I figured, Rachel replied. Just thought you should know what's being said. It wasn't the lie itself that got to me. It was how effortlessly she wielded it. I had grown up believing that family meant loyalty, honesty, and love. But to her, family meant control. The second she lost that control over me, she rewrote me as the villain. 3 days later, the final straw landed. I had just finished cleaning my apartment when my phone buzzed. An email from a realtor. Hi Sophia, following up regarding your inquiry. I've attached the listing for the house on Maple Lane as discussed. Let me know if you'd like to schedule a tour. I froze. I hadn't contacted any realtor. I hadn't requested a tour. Confused, I opened the attachment. And there it was. My childhood home listed for sale. Photos of the living room where we once set up Christmas trees, the kitchen where Mom used to bake banana bread. It was all there, staged, spotless, and devoid of any trace of us. Panicked, I called Aunt Linda. "They're selling it?" I asked, my voice tight. She sighed. "Jason's drowning in debt, Sophia. Maxed out 3 credit cards. He's already pawned your dad's old tools, sold the riding mower. I guess the house was next." I swallowed hard. It wasn't about wanting the house. It was about what it symbolized: years of memories, sacrifices, and the belief that home was something lasting. Now it was just another transaction flipped for cash like it never meant anything. They had handed it to Jason. He had gutted it. And now they expected me to pick up the pieces. But I wouldn't. Not this time. They had burned the bridge. I was making sure I never rebuilt it. I thought I'd cry when I saw the listing. I had prepared for it, expected it. But the tears never came. Instead, I felt hollow, like something inside me had snapped loose and floated away. I stared at the photos. The once beige walls had been repainted a trendy gray. The daisy garden Mom had nurtured was gone, replaced by decorative stones. The front porch swing where Dad used to sip his Sunday morning coffee had vanished, replaced by a sterile bench with generic throw pillows. It looked like any other house now. Any stranger scrolling Zillow would never know what had lived there, what had mattered there. The longer I looked, the more I understood. The house had been gone long before it was listed. Not just physically but emotionally, spiritually. It had stopped being mine the moment my parents decided it was Jason's reward for existing. I closed the listing, exhaled, and opened another tab, my savings account. 4 months, I had been quietly diverting the $1,500 I used to send them into a separate fund. At first it was just a silent protest, a way to reclaim a piece of myself. But now I knew exactly what it was for. It was time to build something of my own. Not out of guilt. Not out of obligation. But out of love, for myself. I started browsing listings in nearby neighborhoods. Modest homes. Quiet streets. Nothing extravagant, just something stable. Something I could fill with warmth on my own terms. That night I slept better than I had in months. The next morning I made a list: credit checks, down payment planning, mortgage prep. It was overwhelming, but for once, my energy wasn't being drained by a family crisis. It was being poured into me. Still, old habits lingered. Sunday afternoon, I caught myself reaching for my phone, ready to check in on Mom, to ask about Jason, even though I dreaded the answers. But now, what was there left to say? She had made her choice. Over and over again. And each time it hadn't been me. Later that day, Aunt Linda texted me. "Thought you should know. Your mom asked the church for financial support. Said her daughter abandoned her. Said Jason is struggling and no one is helping." I stared at the message, bitterness rising in my throat. Even now, even after everything, she was playing the victim. Abandoned? I had been the one abandoned. Emotionally, financially, spiritually. But in her story, I was the cold-hearted daughter. The selfish one. And maybe that was the hardest part. She was rewriting history one whisper at a time. I typed a reply. Let her say what she wants. I'm done correcting the record. And I meant it. Let them spin their stories. Let them cling to their version of events. I had my own to write. That week I scheduled a tour for a small 2-bedroom bungalow on the edge of town. It wasn't perfect. The backyard needed work. The kitchen was trapped in 1992. But when I stepped inside, something clicked. It felt safe. I ran my fingers along the worn banister, picturing slow Sunday mornings with coffee and music, quiet evenings spent reading, laughter-filled dinners with friends. A life built not on appeasement or sacrifice, but on peace. The real estate agent smiled. It has good bones. So do I replied before I could stop myself. That night I put in an offer. It was accepted by morning. And just like that, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. I was building something real. And no one, not my mother, not Jason, not their endless manufactured crises could touch it. Let them gossip. Let them play victims. I was done being the good daughter, if that meant being the invisible one. This new life, it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Once again there was the same old refrain. You're the responsible one, their go-to excuse for making me fix everything. You're her son, I said, my voice steady. You live in the same town. Why aren't you helping her? His expression darkened. You think I haven't tried? I've been the only one taking care of her for months while you're off enjoying your life in that cute little house of yours. The words stung, but not the way he intended. They didn't make me feel guilty, they made me furious. Taking care of her? I repeated, my voice sharper now. Jason, she spent her whole life taking care of you. And now, when she actually needs someone, you're here demanding that I step in. His jaw tightened. This isn't fair, Sophia. She's our mom. No, I said firmly. She was your mom. I was just the backup plan. The one who didn't need help, so she never got it. He looked taken aback, like he hadn't expected me to say it out loud. Like deep down he already knew it was true. She's asking for one last chance, he said quietly. To make things right. She talks about you all the time, says she regrets everything, wishes you'd come back. Did she send you? I asked. He hesitated. She doesn't know I'm here. I raised an eyebrow. So, you're here to manipulate me on her behalf and she doesn't even know? Or did she just not want to face me herself? He said nothing. I sighed and stepped back. I hope she gets better, Jason. I really do. But I'm not paying for it. And I'm not coming back. His lips parted like he wanted to argue, but I cut him off. No, I said sharply. She made her choice. And so did I. Jason stared at me like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. You really don't care, do you? And there it was, the last desperate card they always played. If you don't help, you don't care. I do care, I said softly. I cared for years. And it almost destroyed me. But caring doesn't mean I have to keep letting you drain me dry. He stepped back. You've changed. Yeah, I nodded. I finally have. For a moment he lingered as if he had more to say. But then without another word he turned and walked down the steps. As I shut the door behind him, a strange mix of emotions washed over me. Grief for the family I never truly had, but also relief. Relief that I had finally stopped pretending. I walked back into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat down as the sunlight streamed through the window. Jason was right, I had changed. And it was the best thing I'd ever done. Spring arrived early that year. The trees on my street blossomed in soft pinks and whites, as if nature itself had decided to celebrate my freedom. It had been nearly a year since I stopped sending money. A year since the house on Maple Lane was sold. A year since I last heard my mother's voice. In that time, something inside me shifted in ways I never expected. I no longer woke up dreading a text, an email, or a call asking for more. I stopped flinching whenever an unknown number flashed on my screen. I smiled more. Slept better. Took up weekend hikes. Started reading again. I even adopted a cat. Marbles, a clumsy little rescue who found endless joy in knocking things off the counter just to watch them fall. There wasn't a single moment when I knew I had healed. It wasn't some dramatic revelation. It was more like a quiet unraveling, like I had been holding my breath for years and finally learned how to exhale. But the real turning point came unexpectedly. I was at the grocery store, absent-mindedly comparing almond milk brands, when I heard someone say my name. Sophia. I turned around. It was Mrs. Jennings, our old neighbor from Maple Lane. She used to bring casseroles over when Dad was alive and always smelled like lilac perfume and cinnamon gum. My goodness, she said with a warm smile. I almost didn't recognize you. You look happy. I let out a soft laugh. I am. She placed a hand over her heart. I'm so glad, sweetheart. I worried about you after everything with the house and your mother. I nodded, not eager to revisit old wounds. But she wasn't finished. Do you ever hear from them? She asked gently. No, I said simply. And I'm okay with that. She studied me for a long moment, her expression shifting into something almost regretful. Your mom used to sit on the porch some nights after you left, she said. I'd see her just staring into the dark, sometimes crying. I think she always believed you'd come back. That she could fix it. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to scoff, to dismiss it outright. But another part, a smaller, quieter part, just felt exhausted. I used to think I had to fix it too, I admitted. But I learned the hard way, you can't heal in the same place that broke you. Mrs. Jennings nodded solemnly. No, you can't. But you can grow somewhere new. That night, I sat on my back porch, a blanket wrapped around my legs, marbles curled up beside me, a rare peace settling into my bones. I thought about my mother. About Jason. About the version of myself that once believed love had to be earned through sacrifice. Then I thought about the girl who moved into this little house with nothing but a savings account, a few bruises on her soul and a flicker of hope. She had no idea she was building more than just a refuge. She was building a future. People ask me sometimes if I've forgiven them, and the truth is I don't know. Forgiveness isn't always some grand declaration. Sometimes it's just choosing not to carry the weight anymore. It's waking up and making coffee without bitterness. It's moving forward without looking back. Maybe that's enough. I haven't heard from Jason since that day on my porch. Word is he moved in with his girlfriend's parents, burned through the last of mom's savings and drifted from job to job, always chasing the next excuse. As for mom, I don't know. Aunt Linda says she still lives nearby, still goes to church, still complains about me to anyone who will listen. But none of that matters anymore. Because I finally learned the most important truth of all. Being someone's daughter doesn't mean sacrificing your happiness to earn their love. Love given with conditions isn't love, it's leverage. And I am done being leveraged. These days, I pour my energy into the people who show up without expecting anything in return. Friends who remember my birthday. Coworkers who check in just because. Strangers who hold the door with a smile. And most of all, myself. Last month, I planted a small garden, just a few herbs and some stubborn sunflowers. Nothing fancy. But when I kneel in the dirt, feel the sun warm my back and watch something grow where there was once only emptiness. I think maybe this is what healing looks like. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet, steady growth.